Good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, the Kids Edition, for the month of May, 2021. Good morning, kids. Hopefully you've read the book and you love it, because this is a really good book that we've got for you this month. It is Strange Academy. It's our first Marvel comic that we've done for the Kids Club, can you believe that, actually? And we're really, really, really lucky today to have Skottie Young with us here. We're also supposed to have Humberto Ramos. He'll come eventually, I'm sure. But otherwise, we'll start talking to Skottie, and it'll all be good. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask them in chat, and we will get them added for you. Let's go. Skottie, my first question is always, why comics? Of all the things that you could be doing in the world, what is it about comics that floats your boat? Oh, wait, we got to unmute you. Oh, you're unmuted. There you go.
There we go. First, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Why comics? I think they've been a part of my life long. My son asked me what was the first this morning. What's the first horror movie you saw in the theater, or what's the first horror movie you saw when you were a kid? And I just couldn't answer it, because movies have been a part of my life for as long as I have memory. So I can't place it. And comics were like that as well. I started off with Mad magazines and Archie digests that my grandma would have or find at garage sales. So I started reading them, and then I was an artist I loved drawing when I was a kid, and so comics just had these drawings everywhere. So I was like, oh, this is so cool. And as I grew up and read all this stuff, I just fell in love with this medium of endless options of storytelling and endless genres that you could tell stories in within this one medium. So it didn't take long for me to realize when I was in high school that I think I want to go and disappoint my parents and tell them I would like to make comic books for a living.
That's funny. What's the earliest comic that well, you said Mad and stuff, but like what's the one that stuck with you that put a pin in it for you?
My parents or an aunt or something got me back when I was in elementary school in the 80s. The J.C. Penney's catalog, or the Sears Christmas catalog. Marvel had like comic, like basically grab bag style boxes that you could buy through the catalog.
Yeah. And
it was just a big box of a mix up of comics. And I mean, now it's probably just like they're leftovers, right? Or they're returns, right. Or what. But back then I just got this box and it had a stack of comics in it. And there was, it was all the random stuff Marvel published. So Alf, it had a Bill Sienkiewicz cover.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know who Bill Sienkiewicz was. I was a kid, but Alf, there was some G.I. Joe comics, some Transformer comics in there, but there was an issue of Daredevil in there. I can't remember the number. People watching this will get it, but Typhoid Mary had like thrown Daredevil off a bridge or something, and it was supposedly like the death of Daredevil.
Right.
And I just remember it was like him, and he's laying in like on the ground, and I just was like, I thought Typhoid Mary looked so cool. I thought her name was so cool, and I remember that. But I was so confused, because I was like, where's the story? Like, like what's after? What came before this? So that got me intrigued. And then next, so I was like, oh my gosh, and I went, and that's kind of the first thing that I remember being like, wow, this is really cool. But I still lived in a very, very small town in central Illinois, so I had no access to comics. I didn't know where to get them, outside of like the ones at the grocery store. But it still wasn't any kind of continuity. It wasn't until I was about in junior high when we went to a comic book shop right at the time that Image launched, and I got Spawn #1.
Wow.
And I understood #1, right? Like everything else was like 83, 192 or whatever, but this one was like had a 1 on it, and I was like, I'm at the beginning. I made it to the beginning. And so I got it, and I just fell in love with that. And so then I bought every Image comic there was, every Image comic that came out, I was there for it. If it had the eye on it for a good 10 years, I bought it. It didn't matter. So it was those early Image comics that really kind of hooked me and made me feel like, oh, I can start creating my own worlds, right? Because I loved Generation X and I loved the Marvel stuff later in life. Like I got into X-Men and all that stuff. But man, it was really those early Image books that sent me, like really hooked me into the medium.
Nice. And so I suppose that that years later, when you started publishing through Image, that must have been like a real special thrill then.
Oh, it was huge. Like, and you know, I loved the first time. You know, my first comic book job was at Marvel. My first comic I ever drew was Iceman #3. So it was like it was so exciting to like be published at Marvel. But yeah, when I Hate Fairyland, the first I Hate Fairyland came out, that was I think I even wrote an essay in the back talking about that, like how big a deal it was to have that Image eye on the cover of one of my books, because of how important it was for me right there. I think I was in 7th grade or something like that when Image started. So it's held such a special place for me. So now that I'm a part of that history, it's awesome.
Cool. That's very cool. Did you ever get to find out how that Typhoid Mary story ended?
No,
No, you never tracked it down.
No, I never tracked it down. It's one of those things where I'm like, you know what? That's a special little bubble, like a special little window of my comic history, and I just want to keep it there. I don't want to touch it because in my head, it was so big and huge, but it probably wasn't. Like, so I just rather it. I want to live with the memory.
Yeah, yeah. So you said you drew a lot as a kid. Did you do your own comics as a kid, or just doodling?
I did when I was younger. I did more like children's book style, like you know, one image per page. I remember we did that a little bit in elementary school. I didn't really do comics. I did do a lot of gag stuff because I grew up. I was also a paper boy. So I was, you know, the newspaper was a big part of my life. So I read Calvin and Hobbes and Peanuts and The Far Side and you know, all the comic strips. So that's a lot more so of what I thought of when I drew was kind of comedy and gag stuff.
Yeah.
I loved the movie parody stuff in Mad Magazine. So I would try to draw. I would copy those like characters of famous. You know, I'd try to do the. I remember one of the best ones I nailed was Howard the Duck from the Howard the Duck movie.
Yeah.
Like I copied it so good. But yeah, I never did. Weirdly enough, I never did comics, like straight up sequential page comics. I don't know why I never did that. But I was much more 3-panel comic strip style stuff until I got, and then as I got older, I was into music and skateboarding, and then a lot of my art became very like mostly like street art, graffiti stuff at our skate parks that we build, our ramps and stuff like that. And I'd draw and I'd paint on our skate decks and you know, just a lot of like t-shirt art and things like that. So it kind of went that way when I was in high school. And then after high school is when I started finding some how to draw books. And in fact, Humberto is a big key figure in my story here. I was just out of high school a year or two when the Cliffhanger line of books launched.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I was already a huge fan of Humberto from his DC work and his Image work on DV8 and stuff like that. I was a huge Joe Madureira fan from his X-Men stuff, and I loved J. Scott Campbell from Gen 13. So these guys were all launching new books, and they were my favorite guys. And they released a preview book for each that came out, and it showed each of their projects that they were doing.
Right, I remember.
It showed pencil sketches and everything. And Humberto had actual scans of his penciled pages on the comic art board. Right. I had never seen that before. I didn't know how comic books were made because people don't know, but we like the internet, while it existed then, didn't exist. Like if you wanted to look at an image, you'd like click it and then go cook dinner. And maybe start a show and come back, and it may be 3/4 of the way downloaded, right? Like, so you didn't have access to all this stuff. So when I saw Umberto's raw pencil pages, like he had the grid in blue line, so you could see how he worked the perspective, and you could see what and he's putting X's, and that's how you fill in the blacks. And my mind was blown. It was like I was watching the secret magic behind the page. And I looked at that book so much I remember I went out and bought a perspective book because of Umberto. So for me, it's even crazier, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, that not only am I friends with Umberto for many years now, but he and I are collaborating on a book together. It's like, if you would tell my 19-year-old self this, I'd be like, get out of here. Like it's blown my mind. But yeah, so comic books, I started to learn how to draw comic books a little bit right after high school, when people like Joe and Umberto and Jay Scott started giving us like behind the scenes peeks at that stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you do any formal training for art or self-taught or?
Yeah, no, I didn't go to. I went to one semester of community college and took all remedial classes. So I have no college. I wanted to go to art school. I didn't really learn. I didn't really. School loans and stuff scared me. My whole life I had jobs, right? I was a paper boy. I worked at Big Lots for a while. I waited tables, and so my mind just worked like, if I have the money, I can get a thing. I didn't have a credit card till I was 30. So
wow.
I was very weird about getting myself into things that I might not be able to get myself out of. Sure. So I thought, well, I'll try to save up money and pay for, go to art school. But then you just like, art school is the most expensive schools on planet Earth. So me and my wife, well, we were just getting together then 20 years ago, but we moved to Chicago with the intent for me to go to Columbia School of Art, downtown Chicago, which is one of the most inexpensive art schools in the country. But they've got like traditional animation programs and illustration and some comic book stuff. So I was going to go there, and I was going to save up money, so I was waiting tables, and then I kind of stumbled into getting a job. So and that has weirdly worked out for a while.
So what? I mean, how did you stumble into actually working in comics, like making that jump?
I was a big, definitely a big hustler from a very young age. I used to take all my cassette tape collection to school with me, and I'd rent them out to my friends. So, because I was like, oh, these, VHS, video rental stores had just started coming around. I was like, that's a really interesting concept. I have a lot of tapes, so I would do that. We were in Chicago, and I would go down to Graham Cracker's Comics, where my friend Pat Brower worked at the time, and he worked there for 17 years, I think. And I met him when I was just moving to Chicago, and I was an artist, so I was trying to hook up with other creatives, and Patrick also inked stuff. And then he said that he knew this. He introduced me to a guy named Joe Curry, who self-published comics in Chicago. And, he was like a law clerk during the day and self-published, and used like some of the stuff at the law firm to, do his comic shipping and things like that. And so I met him, and he was like, oh, your stuff's really cool. I got this other project. You'd be cool. You want to draw it? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I've never drawn any comics before, but, we're just kids, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. And he was like, all right, we'll do it. He was going to pay me a little bit, and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. And he was like, well, Chicago Wizard World's coming up next week, which I was always going to go as a fan, but he was like, we'll get you a badge and you could sit at our table with us. Let's draw up a pinup of the book, and we'll say coming soon or whatever. Of course, we're already doing a coming soon. We just decided to do it. And so I went with him and his buddies at Strictly Underground, was the name of their publishing company. Okay. And they let me sit behind the table with him. And I brought my portfolio, which was not a comic portfolio. It was just a big, huge fold out situation with my big, graffiti pieces that I've done and skateboarding art and all this stuff, but no real comic book stuff. Some of the stuff was probably way too swipe. I mean, there's probably some Humberto swipes in there, I'm sure.
Right.
And I was away from the table for a minute, and I came back, and Joe was like, "Hey, a guy from Image just stopped by and loves your stuff and left you a card." And I was like, "What?" And in my mind, I didn't understand how Image worked.
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand how the business worked. So I just
Right.
knew that Image published some of my favorite comic books. So in my mind, my favorite comic books are the most successful comic books of all time, right? In my young mind,
Sure.
which means they're all trillionaires. And I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody from Image stopped by, left a card. I'm totally going to be rolling in it next week, right? It ends up being CB Cebulski. He had just come back from Japan, where he was working for a manga company, and was doing getting together some books for his new studio imprint with Image called Fanboy Entertainment.
Right.
And he was bringing over like Kia Asamiya. He had Takeshi had a book, I think, with him, but he had a couple of little books, and he was looking for some people to do some books with him. So he left a card, and I called him when he was back in New York, and we met. And over that course of the year on the phone, we become friends. So, and we're talking about doing Image books together. Meanwhile, CB is also connected at Marvel. At that time, Marvel was trying to figure out what the manga thing was, because it was taking over, right? If you remember, that right there at the beginning of the 2000s, like everybody was trying to crack that code. Like, why are these books selling so many copies? So Marvel was like, they wanted to try to kind of get in on that a little bit. This was during the Gemis era.
Yep.
And so CB had such big connections, and he understood that. He had a genuine understanding of that market. He had worked in it. And so he was doing some projects there, and he helped kind of get together the mangaverse that they were doing. But he still wasn't an employee there. He was just a freelancer, and he was writing a book and helping consult. And so when that came up, he happened to be out one night with some people at a bar. Mike Martz was one of them, the editors. And I guess Mike Martz had asked CB. He knew that CB knew a ton of young artists. That's always been a strong suit of CB's, is just really seeing talent. And even if they're not there yet, he knows when he's like, there'll be a thing. Sure. And so Mike Martz was like, do you know anybody? We have an issue of this Iceman that Carl Kerschel actually had to back out of. He had some family health issues or something, and they said, do you know anybody who could fill in, like, but do it fast, like it needs to be done like in a month for real. And he was like, yeah, I know this pencil and inker team in Chicago, and they live next, so we could save time. They wouldn't have to like I had a buddy that was inking me in Chicago and drawing with me, and so he just gave him my name. And CB called me. He was like, hey, act surprised, but Marvel's going to call you. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I won't need to act surprised. I will be surprised. So yeah, I just got a call, and they said, hey, do you think you could do this? Keep in mind, I had never drawn a full comic book at this point. So when they called and said, can you turn this issue around in X time? I was like, of course. Yeah, that's not a problem. Meanwhile, I'm like, sweating bullets. I have no idea how I'm going to pull this off. That's how I stumbled into my first job in comics, was that. And then about that issue, that we did that job, and about 6 months later, CB got hired on as a editor. Yeah. And they were putting together some new books. Like, they took some of the books that worked in the mangaverse, and they wanted to do a full series with them. So that's when him and Kari got together, the Spider-Man Legend of the Spider Clan. Yeah. Kari didn't want to draw it this time. He just wanted to write it. So CB was like, this would be perfect for Skottie. So they hired me to do that. And luckily that book had a lot of press at the time, and it had a lot of legs under it. So things started to happen for me pretty quickly after that book. But that's where I feel like, oh my gosh, I definitely tripped and accidentally fell into a comic book job.
Yeah. That's crazy. So, like, what's the most number of pages you had drawn of a comic before that Iceman?
I mean, I had done a couple different 5-page samples, you know,
Okay.
and
Yeah, yeah.
then my friend, one of my friends and I had done a image pitch that had gotten greenlit, and I think we did a 5-page sample. So like altogether maybe 20, 25 pages, but not 25 consecutive pages. And
Right.
again, half of those would be unreadable
Sure,
today. I
sure,
mean, they
sure,
were,
sure.
and I'm not being like faux humble, like, oh shucks.
No,
I mean,
I
I was,
understand. Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
everybody starts
yeah,
off and it's not very good. Yes, I
yeah.
understand
And
that.
there's times where I'm like, I mean, sometimes I look back at the stuff that got published and I'm thinking, like, how in the world did I hold on to the edge of this cliff until I learned from all these great people, you know?
Yeah.
Because once you're in the race and you're running, you can't help but to start to like get better because you're just doing it so much. So luckily, you know, I came up at a time too where I think there was still a lot of nurturing going on from the editorial side of things and really helping you develop as a creator. And so I really benefited and learned a ton from people like, you know, Tom Brevoort and Joe Quesada, and you know, these guys who've been really just crushing it in comics all these years. And then when I start meeting people like Mike Wieringo, and he really kind of took me under his wing, and we became really good friends. And so you start learning so much, not just about art, but about how to navigate this business emotionally sometimes,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, you're from what I remember, I mean, I haven't gone and dug out that Iceman, but from what I remember of your earlier pieces, it's very kind of traditional Marvel style in a lot of ways. And you developed into quite a bit of a stylist, I'd say. I mean, a real cartoonist.
Well, I would say when I was starting off, I was trying to be like a hybrid mix of Chris Pacello, Joe Mad, and Humberto. I think those three were my favorite artists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought, like, well, I'm in comics now and they're my favorite. So I'll kind of take bits and pieces of them and I'll Frankenstein them together.
Yeah.
And it was so hard because those guys are geniuses. And trying to recreate their genius without knowing why you're doing it or how the things work. It was frustrating, man. But by the time I got to Human Torch, I've said this in interviews before, but I'm like, I would just cry sometimes at night because I was like, the day was so hard to pull off this art and it still wasn't looking good. And you're like, and again, people who know me would tell you I'm probably overly confident and cocky to the point of annoying. So I'm not being like, oh shucks, my work's no good, you know. But I would really be like, oh my god, I don't know how I'm going to keep this job. This isn't good enough, you know. But like at some point you repeat and repeat, and then there was a nice time around. Honestly, about the time that we started developing the Wizard of Oz books.
Yeah.
That's right when I like all the reference material left my desk. I was not looking at other people's work. Like I was just drawing and I was interpreting. And that job changed everything for me. Like it changed the way I think about art. It changed it changed how I accept jobs and turn jobs down. Because I realized like I love drawing like this and I don't like drawing like that. So it was So definitely. I think there's always a shift. I mean, I think if you go back and you know, if you look at like Bill Sienkiewicz's early work, right?
Sure.
Like he was like very Neil
Adams,
yeah, he's very Neil Adams.
Yeah.
You have no idea that what you're getting ready to get in a little bit. Like once he realizes like this doesn't feel right anymore, you know. Right. And then we get the genius that is Bill Sienkiewicz for the next, you know, handful of years, which is just amazing. So I always love the transition of people's artwork.
Yeah, no, and the Oz books are where you're you know, you kind of took off. I mean, these were really critically acclaimed at the time. And again, it's that cartoony style, you know, big heads and little bodies and
right.
You know, it's very different than anything else that that Marvel's publishing, certainly at the time.
For sure.
I'm guessing that a lot of the basis of this style comes from you know, doing graffiti art. Yeah,
definitely. There was a lot of that coming up, and I was a huge Disney fan. I'm still to this day, I'm a huge animation fan. Even when you said like, did you have training? I didn't, but I have every making of book for any movie, and I've always viewed them as my textbooks because these cartoonists are just geniuses. But definitely a lot of graffiti influence because I grew up a huge hip hop head. So that music and culture was a really big part of my life. Then you start mixing in skateboard culture, which shares a lot of that DNA, where everything's about art and little characters and all of that started to really feed in. And then, like I said, I think a lot of it, especially when you start getting into the again, it seems like I often fall into these things, but like the variant covers that I do, which is the craziest fluke job of all time, I think, that's turned into like an eight almost 9-year thing. A lot of that to me, because a lot of people are like, oh, like they call it chibi or whatever, and I'm like, I don't view it like that. Like I still think of it as Muppet Babies, right? Like I still think of it as more Peanuts wearing Marvel costumes, where I don't view them as like babies like Goo Goo Gaga. I view them as small adults, like in the same way like when you read Peanuts. Like Peanuts was like a cipher of adult life through the lens of little like kids, but they're still talking so mature, right? So I loved doing these covers in a way of thinking of them as like Far Side gags, like a one image gag. But yeah, it definitely probably started in the graffiti era and then mixed in with all my animation influence as a kid and music influence, and that's kind of where everything kind of started to meld together.
Yeah, where did the first of the baby? What was the first one of those the covers? Do you remember?
Well, the official first ones was a 4 or 5 issue miniseries in 2009 called X Babies. It was Marvel did a miniseries and they had me do the series covers. And this is how funny it is. And I know that you guys know this, having the store, is right time, right place is important, right? Timing is everything.
Yeah.
And you could have one book come out that's this and and do nothing, and a almost identical book 2 years later come out and take the world by storm.
Yeah.
So I do these X Baby covers in 2009, and people are like, cool, right? Cool. Like, that's fine. That's cute. And I'm like, cool. I mean, and again, it wasn't even my thing. Like they said, do you want to do covers for X Babies? I was like, yeah, cool. That was fun. I remember the Arthur Adams stuff and JJ Kirby stuff, and that was awesome. So yeah, I'll do that. So flash forward 3 years later, Avengers AVX is going on,
right?
Getting ready to go, and Marvel is doing an exclusive cover with Midtown, a wraparound for the #1 exclusive at Midtown, and they George Belliard at Marvel hit me up and was like, hey, do you want to do Midtown's cover? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they said. I suggested to them, because he said you had done those old X Baby covers, and then you did the badge art at Heroes last year that had the X Babies on each, the different things or whatever. He was like, that was really cool. I just suggested, hey, maybe they'd want you to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, again, it wasn't my thing. It's
right.
Just, if you say that and I think it's fun, I'll be like, oh yeah, it's cool. And they were like, he was like, so it might be kind of cool to do that, like an X Babies thing, and just put as many characters as you can. And they gave me, I had a big spreadsheet of all the characters that were going to be big players in AVX and the current versions of them. Yeah. So, yeah, I just drew up a cover. You put, I think 32, 33 characters on it. I didn't think anything of it. It just was a cover gig, and Marvel Midtown sold so many copies. That thing, I couldn't turn on any of my social media feeds without that cover popping up for almost a month.
Wow.
It was just going and being announced and look at this and so right around that time, again, timing's everything. That AVX was leading into Marvel Now, which is where Marvel, for those who don't remember, Marvel's taking all their top talent and swapping books and starting fresh new runs, which is where we've gotten some of the best runs. Like Jason Aaron's run on Thor started at Marvel Now.
Yeah.
And now he'll be mentioned forever when people talk about those Thor runs of all time, right? Like,
right, absolutely.
Like it was just phenomenal. So that was a really cool thing. And so that was coming out of that AVX. So that cover had done so well that you know, David Gabriel and the squad up there at Marvel was like, "Hey, Scott, do you want to do 10?" Or he said, "Do you want to do 5 number
Right.
ones covers?" And I had never been given 5 covers at one time. I was like, "Whoa, all right, that's cool. I'll do 5 covers." So they were like, "Do it like that." I was like, "All right." So I did up 5. I did up a couple, and before I finished the 5, they gave me another 5.
Right.
And I was like, "I got 10 covers now." And literally, I never since then. That was 2012, and since then, I have never made it to the end of a list of assignments before I have 10, at least 10 more.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just been going. I've been doing, I mean, I'm in the, we don't know. CB actually texted me the other day and asked me where we are with it. I mean, we have to be past 500. I know we're past, I think I know we're past 500. Somebody has counted them before. I sure haven't. But yeah, that's one of those things that, right? Like 3 years earlier, I did the exact same thing and it's fine. But wherever everybody is, where everybody was with life, um, sometimes I think if I look at it, I think that we hit at the right place and right time where a lot of young comic book fans were starting to become parents.
Yeah.
And so like it just hit this right thing, this right time where, oh, that's cool. My son can have this, you know, and I've seen bedrooms painted in my covers. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's been such a cool thing. And to this day, it's still like a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're that guy." And I'm like, "Oh, it's so cool that you think of me like that." But it's like that's my side hustle.
Right. 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 Right.
Because I'm still just only thinking about writing and drawing the actual comics.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's like yeah, it couldn't be happier and have more fun of doing those covers.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting that 500. I actually hadn't realized it was that many. I thought it was like in the 2 or 3 range.
Right.
Is it difficult or is it easier at this point? Like because you're doing some of the same characters again and
Mhm.
again and again and again.
Right.
Is it harder to find a new Spider-Man idea?
The Spider-Man poses are getting harder because also these are little bodies. There's only so much
Right.
change that you could do with them. But I've been happy with every Spider-Man one. Um, what I try to do is I try to do a nice balance between here's a really cool or cute pose cover, and then here is a comic strip gag.
Yeah.
And when I nail a gag, that's my favorite thing about those covers is um, like when Jonathan's Secret Wars was a thing, and I got to do covers for all those Secret Wars miniseries. Um, One of my favorite ones. It was the least amount of drawing I'd ever done on a cover. But I took that old Civil War style cover, right, where it was cut in
Yeah.
half and it was like white on top, blue in the bottom of Civil War, and I think they made a big poster of this. But I had Tony and Cap, Iron Man and Cap, chilling out, hanging out on the logo, the Civil War logo, and he's like, Iron Man asked Captain America to explain one more time what Civil War, like what their book was about, and he goes, "I think it's about filing paperwork." Like, and he said, "I think it's about like faxes and filing paperwork and stuff and filling out forms," because that's my favorite thing to do. Is like Mad Magazine taught me that we make fun of things that we love the most, right? Because we're in it, and that's what I grew up doing. Like I read them doing spoofs on all of our favorite movies, which I love because you're like, I love this thing, so I'm going to poke fun at it a little bit, and that's what I love, trying to find what a book is about. At its if I had to wrap this up, and I was like, really, when you think about it, it sounds like Civil War is about a bunch of heroes fighting each other, but really it was about you should sign this paperwork,
Right.
and right. And so I love the idea that I'm drawing these big superhero characters as little kids, and I get to have them say stuff like that to each other. um, that's fun to me, and I love that. And I love every now and then I'll send it a cover like that, or I sent it a cover the other day, and my old friend and editor Nick Lowe, who edits us on Strange Academy,
Yeah.
he will text me and say, I just can't believe that you get this is your life. He's like, so awesome to watch such joy happen on paper. It just, he's like, I love that you exist in this business. So he's such a good guy and always makes me feel really good. But that's how I feel. Like I just feel really lucky that I get to play with some of the coolest toys in comics, and they let me bang them around really hard and laugh at each other, you know?
Yeah, that brings us really nicely to Strange Academy. Let me also just kids who are watching. I see there's a lot of chat going on. Jordan hasn't told me there's a question, so are there? Okay, well we'll get to that in a sec. But if you guys do have a question, write it in the chat, and we're gonna have Skottie answer some. So Strange Academy, where did the idea for this come from?
I was such a huge fan of Generation X in the 90s with Scott Lobdell and Chris Bachalo. I always thought the X-Men were really cool, and I understood that they went to a school. I mean, they called the building they were at was called a school, but I never really felt like that. They looked like adults.
Sure.
And they never felt like a school to me. So it really, to me, just felt like adults at a headquarters.
Yeah.
And so when Generation X came out, I was like, wow, this actually is weird. Like, this feels like a school, like a little private school. And for the first time, I really felt like mutants, like the whole thing where they feel like, where they're like, oh, we feel different and everything. It really came across because that group of mutants, for people who don't remember, were, like, there was a character named Skin, and his mutation was that he has like miles of excess skin on him. Right. That's like super gross and weird. And how do you deal with that when you're a teenager? Yeah. Husk was a really cool character where she like emotional, like when she got emotional would like shed her skin and she wouldn't know what would be under. She had to learn how to like control what the next level underneath her skin was. So she would shed like a corn husk, Yeah. There was just so many.
Jaw was blown off by his powers.
Yes, Chambers is my favorite character. He's so gross and weird, and so I fell in love with that book. And I mean, a big part of that too was I think Chris Bachalo's a genius. Sure. Yeah. So I fell in love with that, and I always had. I've always been drawn to those stories. I love coming of age stories, whether it's comic books or movies or novels. I just love coming of age stories. And obviously, I'm a big fan of the high school party stories, right? Where there's this big group of kids, and I love the dynamics of kids and things like that. So when I was back in the day, when I was first in Marvel, when I was working on after Human Torch, I worked on Venom, and then while we were working on Venom, while I was working on Venom, I met Zeb Wells, and my editor on Venom introduced me to Zeb Wells, and Zeb wanted to pitch a Generation X reboot. And I was like, oh my God, we're best friends. And so Zeb and I teamed up, and we were trying to get his Generation X pitch off the ground. It didn't end up going. They didn't end up doing it. That's the days where X-Men, it was the movie, it was all messed up with movies and stuff. So I can't remember the details of why it did it, but that's how Zeb and I became really good friends then. And we pitched New Warriors. Yeah. And then that's where we did that together. But so I've always thought about the school aspect of these things. And I think that we always keep circling around back to the X school. But I really started to think about, I loved Jason Aaron's run on Doctor Strange, Jason and Chris. And that got me thinking, like when he was working on that, it was right around the time that Jason and I were we had been friends for a long time. And me and my wife and family were thinking about moving to Kansas City where he lived. And so Doctor Strange was really in my head a lot. And that's when I started thinking that, man, this would be really cool. I think the magic side of Marvel is a really interesting place that we don't explore a lot outside of direct Doctor Strange books. But I said, in a lot of ways, there's so many aspects of the Marvel universe that's magic leaning. I think, obviously you've got a lot of magic like qualities in Asgard. You've got, everything's got a little magic to it. And so, sure. I literally one night like texted CB. It was like 11 at night, 11 p.m. And I was just like, dude, I got like this idea, I think, cooking up for a magic school at Marvel, like where we just take characters from all these different places and create new kids. And I said specifically Asgard and Weird World, and I was just tossing out all these corners. And he was like, "Wow, that sounds pretty interesting." And then I got invited to an executive editorial retreat. Every now and then, it's just the editors and executives that get together, and some of the stuff that I had going on right now, they had invited me out to be a part of this conversation. And what I didn't know when I got there is that I was on it said on the agenda said Skottie's magic book, and I was like, oh my gosh. I just thought it was like, cool, you like this, we'll talk about it and we'll see what happens. But they had me pitch it at that editorial meeting, and I really did not think it was going to go over well. Magic is a tough sell because magic, guys, anything can happen, right? And it was really the opposite. Everybody really, really like sparked up to it and kind of enjoyed it. So again, it was one of those things where I just was like, I think sometimes passion goes a long way, and they could tell that like I was really into this idea. It wasn't me going like, oh my God, I need a job. What's my next job? It was like, in fact, I had just gotten a Deadpool. Like when I pitched this, I had just gotten and started writing Deadpool.
Yeah.
And that was like a dream. That was like one of my dream writing jobs. So I was like, I really didn't need more work. I was pretty busy. I was writing Deadpool, still working on I Hate Fairyland, which I was writing and drawing.
Yeah.
So really, I couldn't believe that I found myself with another project that I was creating from the ground up. So that's how Strange Academy came to be, as far as getting it greenlit at Marvel.
Yeah. Was the original pitch that you were going to draw it, or did you always know that you wanted someone else to draw the book?
Yeah, it was always I wasn't gonna draw it. Most of the stuff that I do all the covers there and stuff like now, because I just, with kids and life, and I have little bandwidth. So most of my interior drawing is on creator-owned stuff at the moment. Right. But I still do tons of covers and the writing stuff for Marvel, and then obviously I do pin designs, and we've got some really cool stuff cooked up that I can't talk about yet, but there's some really cool stuff on the art front with Marvel. But no, I knew right away that I pitched it in mind with another artist. I could not have said. I had to be honest and say I didn't even think to say that it would be Humberto, because I didn't think in a million years I could get him. He's working on Spider-Man, which is one of the it's like his dream job. So there's just so much. I didn't think there was any chance that we could get him or afford him. So luckily I was able to, when we started talking about artists, I threw out a few, and Nick Lowe was like, well, Humberto would be perfect for this. And I was like, of course he'd be perfect for this. He's the best teen artist in comics. Like nobody draws kids better than this guy. Like, I don't know what superpower he was given, but he definitely, that's one of them. So I was like, of course he'd be perfect, but like, you guys are going to let us take him away from, I can't remember if he was finishing Spider-Man or Champions at the time. I think it was both. Yeah. Or he had wrapped up Champions and back on Spider-Man. So I was like, you guys aren't like, they're going to let me take and have him jump over on a book like this that's unknown. Like, it's a brand new book with new characters, and we have no idea how this is going to go. So I was like, I can't see it being okay. And they were like, well, I mean, it's possible. We'll have to see. And again, it's one of those things like right time, right place. I was just happened to be like, as soon as all this got like the green light, I was flying down to Mexico to attend a convention that Humberto helped put together. And so Humberto picked me up at the airport himself one night. And again, he and I had been friends now at this point for years, so we're really close. But so he picked me up at the airport, and I just got in the car. And we weren't even out of the airport, like pretzel driveways yet, before I was like, hey, listen, before everybody gets here, I gotta run something by you. and I told him a book, and I said, "What are you planning on doing after Spider-Man?" And he's like, "I don't know. Maybe I'll do. I don't know." So I just pitched Strange Academy to him in the car, and he was pretty much in before we got to the hotel.
Wow.
Yeah, he was just like, "No, in," and it was awesome. Like, so then at that point, it was just, we had to try to figure out, the really fun stuff, the business stuff, But
Yeah.
yeah, it was yeah.
That hustle really works for you, man.
I know. It's like, what do they say? Luck is preparation meets opportunity or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when things come along, just go yes, and we'll see you later.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, uh, did you do any, I mean, being a cartoonist yourself, did you do any sort of preparatory drawings for this, or like, here's what I think the characters might look like, or do you just leave that all until Humberto came along on the project?
I left that one to Humberto. That's probably one of my favorite parts of having jumped over to the writing side, is being surprised on the art front. When I was drawing other people's scripts for years, there's coloring lettering after me, but like, I'm kind of like, I'm the one. You give me a script and I read it, and you'll love the story, but then past visually, and I love looking at visuals, but that part of the process I never got to take part in the same way, because by the time, even when the colorist got done with my work, Jean's been coloring me for years, and he's amazing. But then I'm only still looking at I'm noticing little things I would have tweaked about myself. Now, over these last years that I've been writing so much and working with people like Humberto and Nick Klein and Jorge and Jorge Corona and Aaron Conley on my image books, working, when I write this stuff and send it out, and or like in Strange Academy case, like, okay, here's character descriptions, and some of these I see it in my head, and then I give it away, and then Humberto comes back, and it's like, oh my God, this is what collaboration is, right? Where I did a thing, but you plussed it up better than I could have ever. The only thing I did on a few characters was, this is the fun part of being able to draw, is getting his thing, throwing it in my Photoshop real quick, and be like, oh, this is really cool. What about, and doing a little ping pong back and forth.
Right.
That was very fun. So like Desi was a character like that. Like, I had a specific thing that I was thinking, and I wanted to see where he was. And he came back to me with some elements that were way cooler than I thought. And then I wanted him to take some body shape stuff and do it a little different here. And then that was a really fun way to nail it. But yeah, so it's different with different things. Like my book, Bully Wars, that was a book that I did intend to draw. And it had been sitting in a folder of mine for a lot of years, almost 10 years. And I did intend to draw it. So I had some initial sketches and designs done with that. So when I got to the place where I was like, you know what, this might be fun to do with someone else. And Aaron Conley's a just awesome cartoonist. So when I just gave him like, hey, here's my things, take what you want, leave back what you want. So he took some inspiration, but then plussed them up way past what I had. So, but it's been a mixed bag. Jorge Corona on Middle West was the opposite. He really didn't want me to do anything first, because he was afraid if he saw it. And I totally get this. Like, if you see it, you can't kind of unsee it. And then you're stuck at that starting spot. And I totally get that, because if there's something already designed, you're kind of like, well, that's probably not how I would have done it. But now I'm kind of in that headspace. So, but it's been a mixed bag on how we do. But Strange Academy was definitely taking Humberto's lead on all that stuff.
Nice. Let's go to a kid's question. Let's do that. And then we'll come back for more adult questions later.
All right.
What do you got for me, Jordan? It's Ron Binder. Question: why does Emily wear headphones?
Well, that was a That was an Umberto add-on and in design. Like he when he drew Emily, she had headphones on, and I just leaned into that and was like, yeah, I mean, I was a headphones wearer. I was definitely one of the people. I to this day, like after I done with this interview, I have to go get groceries, and you will see me with my headphones there while I'm getting groceries. Like I've always had headphones on listening to music. So when he drew headphones on her, I was like, wow, I really dig that, and I could connect with that because that's how I grew up, and that's how I still live today. And there's some really fun. There's some really fun story tie-ins. I found ways to loop that into some cool magic stuff that I wouldn't have thought about had he not just randomly put headphones in the drawing. And that's another one of those amazing collaboration things where it's improv. Like, oh, cool, you want to draw a character with headphones? All right. Let me try to find some magic stuff that make them make sense. And so yeah, it's just Alberto drew it, and now they're kind of weaved into the story.
Nice. I'll go with the natural follow-up to that. What kind of music is Emily listening to most of the time?
I think that I had her listening to I didn't know if we could get away with it or not, so I can't remember what to do. But she was like Brady Carlisle. I think that's what she was listening to there. My wife's a huge Brady Carlisle fan, as am I, but my wife just adores Brady Carlisle. So I wanted to give a little nod to that.
Nice. Next one, Jordan. Also from Ron. He's got more than one question. Question: what are Calvin's superpowers?
Well, Calvin's magic is tied to his coat. His jacket is again, I can't remember which issues have been out so far, so I don't want to get too spoilery. But
they've only read through 6. So
they've only read this one. Yeah. So Calvin has a backstory that you're going to get into and learn a lot more about him in the next 5 issues. Is it 5 or 6? Do we do?
Maybe it is 5. No, it's 6.
It's 6. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 6. So in the next 6 issues, I'd say if you liked this volume, jump into the next one, because that is where you're going to actually answer your own question about what is Calvin's magic. But it is tied directly to his coat, his magic coat.
Neat. You got another one? Yeah, I do got one. Dylan. I can't even read the rest of that. Question: what's the prospect or possibility of Strange Academy being picked up as a show? Do you feel like you need to write your comics and do them as a TV show, or are you just doing what you usually do?
I don't think about any of that while I'm making these. If I don't know the possibility. That's a whole nother line of business. If anything like that happens, I will definitely be in the know and probably be involved in some which way. But it's not anything that I'm concerned with at the moment, and definitely not something I ever concern myself while creating the comics. And that goes for Strange Academy or I Hate Fairyland or Middle West. While I'm making the comic, I just want to make the best comic that I can. Because that's the job that I chose to do and love. If they have life, if these things turn into things beyond that, that's awesome. But I don't ever want to feel like I didn't do all I wanted to do here and then be let down on the screen somewhere. So I really just kind of focus on making the best books possible.
Yeah, I'll ask a follow-up to that, which is it difficult or well, so when you do create your own work, obviously you own it. You own those characters. You own what's going on. When you're working for Marvel, though, you don't own any of these things. I mean, there's some level of participation, but it's not the same thing. Is there any trepidation on your part to create a whole school full of characters? In fact, I mean, it's not just 1 or 2, right? Right. All of these characters could theoretically go on to have a life long after you.
Sure. There's obviously going to be feelings there, but I think that's part of the balance. If that's all I was doing, if all I was doing was working at Marvel, and my main job was just creating new properties and IP for them, then I could definitely probably see myself having some maybe heavy feelings about that. Yeah. But it's not. That's not. Strange Academy is one of 6 things that I do right now. Right. outside of my creator-owned books and all these other things. So for me, I'm okay with the idea of creating 4 things over here that I own completely, but also creating some things that add to the landscape of the comics that we all grew up reading. Because everything that we fell in love with was created by someone. So if you love reading Spider-Man for all these years, or you love reading the X-Men for all these years, or you love reading Hulk, like these Fantastic Four, these guys, they were all created by people who had to at some point let them go. Now we all know that history gets rocky at some point. I think that we're way more in a place now where creators we are much more eyes open, and we have lawyers on our sides and things like that to kind of keep us protected from the end. So for me, I am very much a person who knows what I'm going into before I get into it. So if I'm going to do it, I've already decided that I'm okay, however this shakes out. If these guys end up on TV or on the big screen or whatever, and they end up this or that, and I get whatever I have agreed to, that's what I got into. I'm fine with that. And I will benefit from it in ways that you might not be able to draw a linear line from, but all of these things connect. You know what I mean? Like this feeds this, and it's a really cool balance. So for me, it's just the idea is exciting to have some things that I've created from scratch that will have a permanent home at Marvel for all time. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I do too. Got another question. Go. Cool. Oh, you got to find it now. Great. Okay, there he goes. It's Ron again. Hey, Ron. Question: why does Toth not like to wear shirts?
I think that he comes from Weird World, and also they are in. So Toth is part Crystal Warrior and part Man Thing. If everybody remembers, there was a run in Weird World.
The kids don't remember any of that.
Right. Well, there's a brand new series called Weird World that came out 5 or 6 years ago. But in that world, there's these giant man things, and they're basically just swampy creatures and bigger versions of the man thing that we know in the Marvel universe. So Toth is from that world, and he is part that. So he has a real sense of being natural. And also he's in New Orleans, and if you've never been to New Orleans, in any sort of hot months, it's very, very humid and hot there.
Yes, it is. Even in a not hot month, it's very hot.
Yes, very hot, humid. Yeah.
It looks like we got one more question, which is also from Dylan. Skottie, you have so many signatures and style signatures. Why do you have so many? He changed his username.
That was one of my biggest dilemmas as I was coming up. Was I just never landed on it, because like that's not a natural thing. Like, is to have like a signature. You want one, and you want it to be recognizable. And I just didn't know. So for the longest time, I just signed SY, and then I was like, I don't know. But now I'm finally landed in these last number of years. I finally landed where I'm staying, which is I've got my full name signature that I sign artwork with, and then I've got my autograph signature, which is, I guess what I need to explain there is the two are different. I can write all the letters of both, Skottie Young on a piece of art because it's just one time, and I'm doing that. There's no possible way to do that during signings that I do, because there's thousands of books. Right. So, over the course of a weekend at a convention, I will sign thousands of comic books. And so I have to find an autograph. I had to develop an autograph there that looks like my name and can tell it's mine, but also doesn't take me 15 seconds per book, because at that point I'd be signing a lot less comics. So
yeah, that's like one of the secrets of professional cartooning that no one ever talks about.
I know it's a strange thing, and it's weird to even know that you have a strategy to it. It's a weird thing to have a strategy for.
Yeah, I love that. No, I really love that. One of the things I really like about Strange Academy is just how it's all over the whole Marvel universe. You're actually playing with the whole thing. Is this Is this exciting for you as a creator to be able to hit all these corners?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I love putting myself in a position where I can't get bored.
Yeah.
Like I pretty much made it to where we can open the gate and play in all the realms. And by having kids from all these places here, we really get to tell any kind of story we want. Coming up, we've got field trip stories. We've got a field trip to what you guys have to look forward to in the next graphic novel, a collection of 6 issues, is a field trip to Asgard. Um, we've got a whodunit, like a detective story. We've got some really cool, fun things coming up that we get to do because we've kind of made sure that we can keep this open to the Marvel universe at large, and have guest stars come in and cameos from characters that we really dug. And that's something I love. I like to be able to be like, well, I probably can't go write 5 issues of Dead Girl, but I can definitely throw her in as a school counselor in a couple of pages.
Yeah, yeah. And and to me at least, I mean, some of these concepts I like them as supporting concepts, right? I like the idea of Asgard. But anytime a comic book is set only in Asgard,
Right.
who cares?
Right.
I mean, because it's but this is great because you've got Asgard and then you've got the Everglades and then you've got Weird World and like everything's
Right.
jumping around and
Right.
you can take the best of all those pieces and kind of make a melange out of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Media
Exactly.
plays, if you would, of comics.
Yes.
Yeah. And Bouillabaisse makes me think, why New Orleans? Why was that where you set the book?
Well, that was a thing where we sit down and obviously we're thinking about. I knew that I wanted Dr. Voodoo to be the headmaster of the school, not Strange. Strange's more like founds the school and checks in, right? But I wanted like the dean to be Dr. Voodoo, and then we're talking about, do we hide it in Central Park? Is it like a secret entrance when you walk under a certain bridge, or like
Right.
we're just trying to think about it. But then we're like, God, everything's in New York and there's probably 78 hidden things. And so me and Humberto were sitting in CB's office after a retreat once, and he and I can't even remember which one of us, but it just came up in conversation like, oh, New Orleans might be cool because of the Dr. Voodoo connection. And obviously New Orleans just has such a rich history of the occult and magic and things like that itself. So yeah, I was like, man, we'll ask CB, and we just brought up CB's like, oh, that could be cool. And I was like, I also think that we should take a research trip to there. Which we actually did. Me and Berto and the editorial staff and my wife, who was a photographer, went to New Orleans for the week and toured. So a lot of stuff that you guys are seeing in that first book there, those are based on photos that we took in real life. We went out in swamps that look like those swamps, and we went through voodoo museums that look like what you see in there exactly. So my wife just went around and shot pictures all week, and we went to went to jazz blues shows, and we did it up. We just lived, and we went to like the cool blacksmith. I can't remember, Letty's Blacksmith pub or whatever, where there's no electricity. It's all candlelit.
Right.
Yeah. So we went and did it. It was really cool. And then that's where going there is how we knew how we wanted to deal with the school and where to put it, which is we walked by this one courtyard that was gated, and it was all run down. And I was like, man, this is like a huge thing of land. Like, it just looks so run down and there's nothing in there anymore. And it's all rusted and gross. And I was like, oh, this would be really cool. Like, cause nobody would want to even break into this, because it just looks junky and abandoned on the inside. So that's when I was like, well, we should do this where it's all run down until you if you have your thing and you have your crest on and you touch it, and then when you enter, then it's the big vast campus of Strange Academy.
Yeah, no, very cool. The kids have been reading this as the graphic novel, but obviously it's a serialized comic first,
Mm-hmm.
which is different than most of the way that these kids are reading comics today. The comic is in traditional comic format, and
Mm-hmm.
this book is smaller in more of
Mm-hmm.
the graphic novel format.
Right.
What do you think of that? The different format for the same material.
I think it's cool. I do think that I think we talked about later doing, and again, I don't know how much later, but there may be bigger versions that collect 2 graphic novels into one or something like that later
Right.
down the line. But I like it in that it breaks. I think that it helps break it into the visuals that kids today are used to reading comics. Like a lot of times, familiarity is important. I think when you're talking about like going and grabbing your entertainment. And just like with us with real comics, if all of a sudden you have this really big comic, you're like, this is different. I don't know. And it's not that it's good or bad, but I think we have a lot of new kids coming up reading, Raina Telgemeier's books,
Yeah.
reading Bone, reading all these books and they're in that kind of 6x9 format. And if to get them to be like, oh God, that looks cool, is just having it look like that size, I'm in. Like, because I want more kids reading comics.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a champion of that. So if it makes sense to them, and it seems like a lot of times it makes sense to bookstores and stuff like that. I think it looks good on you guys' bookshelves when it matches up with all these other books, and if you guys can shelve it in a way that feels like it flows with other books that they're liking, I think it benefits everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything that you guys have changed because you know that there's now a smaller form factor of it, or you're just producing it for the full size and not?
Well, we knew from the beginning that that we were going to be doing this.
Okay.
So I definitely was conscious of panel count
Mm-hmm.
and where and how much dialogue on all any given page, because I didn't want Humberto's artwork to get too crunched and when it got reduced. So I was definitely, but that's helpful. That's another one of the benefits of me having drawn comic books for 20 years,
Yeah.
and writing them for over 10, is I can do that math very quickly and realize, like, all right, this page is going to need, like, I could see the visual page and know, like, this is page I'm going to have to give him 3 panels here and let him like really enjoy it, because this is, I want this to look really good at any size you read it at, big or small.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about the book as well is all the sort of the back matter.
Right.
The beignet recipe, the permission
Right.
slips.
Right.
Is that you coming up with that as well, or?
No, that's the awesome editorial team. Like that, I gotta give Nick Lowe and his crew all the credit in the world for that stuff. That I love it. I love it just as much. That's another one of those collaboration things that I get excited about, is that everybody that's a part of this book with us, a part of our team, is fully in. So everybody's bringing something fun to the table, and I get just as surprised when I'm looking at the emails and the recipes and all that stuff. It's pretty great.
Yeah, nice. How about this one? And you may not be able to do this, but is there a favorite character that you have
Oof.
of the kids? I mean, I know you love them all because they're all your children, but
They are, yeah. I really love writing Calvin. I like writing. I love writing his bubbly optimism, despite him having a little bit of a hard childhood. Um, I really do love Doyle. I loved writing Doyle. Um, he was a very cool character to write because he just looks so cool. But also, I like the dilemma that he was in, which is, his dad is one of the biggest villains in the Marvel universe, but we don't even know if he's ever met his dad. Like, we don't know what, and is he real? Like, is he really offspring? Like, is that, so there's a lot of questions, I think, around that character, and I like characters who have a lot of questions. But then I also really like Zoe because I think her secret is really cool.
Yeah.
I think her secret's really cool, and Humberto draws it so cool. So, um, yeah, it is hard to say. It is hard to say, but I'd say those three kind of rise to the top for me.
Very
But
cool.
then, but each time I say another one, I'd say another one. So yeah,
Sure,
I
sure,
didn't have
sure, sure,
to say.
I think Desi's my favorite. I think
I was gonna say she's my next one because Zoe, and then Zoe. Then I write Zoe. I'm like, well, Zoe couldn't be my favorite if I didn't have the if her and Desi didn't
yeah,
have the connection that they have. And then
yeah.
Desi has like a raw innocence about her that I love exploring. So yeah, it's she's cool too.
Let's flip the question. Is there any one of the kids that you haven't quite found the full hook on yet?
Yeah, I need at some point I need to figure out a little bit more with Armand. That was a character that Umberto brought this really cool like Mexican history, like mythical creature magic to, like a real folklore, and that we kind of put a Marvel spin on it. But that's definitely a character who I haven't yet had time to spotlight on, which we're obviously getting there as we go along. The next one we're way more Calvin centric, but yeah, we'll definitely get there. He's definitely somebody I need to like remind myself, like, okay, focus.
Yeah. You've got such a big cast. I mean, not just the students, but then you've got all the teachers as well.
Right.
Do you find it difficult to juggle that many characters and keep them all, sort of involved in the narrative?
It is a challenge that I think that I have gotten better and better and better at. It's definitely the second arc that actually I just wrapped up, the second arc. So I definitely have figured out the puzzle on how to take these kids over here and these kids over here and do a little separation dance. So I'm not, but what's funny is they were not all supposed to be main characters. I mean, when we first talked about it, it really was supposed to be about 5 of them, and
Okay.
there were more, and the other ones we just kind of peppered in to be like, well, if we show some background characters or we need any supporting characters, here's some other cool concepts, and maybe we'll develop them at some point. Like honestly, Calvin was going to be like, to me at the first he was a background character, but then I wrote issue 1 and it's like I couldn't resist giving them all space, and it just worked. And then we all of us found a way to like each character in a different way. So we kind of like accidentally had such a big cast. But again, I love coming of age stuff. I love I loved watching Buffy, and I loved Smallville, as wacky as that show was. So I've always liked things with big casts and the ability to go and play here for an issue and forget about some of the other casts, and then when you go back, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I've missed her or I've missed him. But yeah, it's a challenge that I'm getting better at as I go, I think.
Very good. Oh, it looks like we have another audience question. Let's
Okay.
bring that one up. Nope. Maggie Verdane. I can't. I don't know. I'm not going to try and mispronounce people's names. Why did you make Doyle die?
Well, in stories, you have to have some stakes sometimes, and some of the lessons that are going to be learned at a school like Strange Academy are going to be big, dangerous lessons. So I had to choose someone. I had to take the story to a place that kind of really made these kids realize that magic is not just fireworks coming out of their fingers. That they can really, really get themselves in trouble, and the forces that are out in the world that they're going to have to face are not messing around. So, yeah, I would say jump into the next arc and see what you think on where we take it.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, then I guess my last question on the book, we'll keep with the characters. Is there one of the adults that you, that you have decided, oh wow, I like this character a lot more than I knew? Because it seems like at the beginning you're kind of like, well, here's all of the magic characters in the Marvel universe.
Right. Well, that. It's like first issues are very difficult to write, right?
Right.
Like, so it is like such a dance where you're like, I got to give you a lot, but I can't give you everything, but I can't give you nothing. And also a book like ours, there's so many new characters that if you don't have something to grab onto in the Marvel universe, I was afraid like maybe, you just walk away. So I was like, I just need to show you a bunch of cool guys in a panel,
right?
And say like, these people are going to show up. I think that I love Dr. Voodoo. I really love that character. I think Zelma's Zelma's really cool too, the librarian.
Yeah.
I'm really partial to Ileana though, because people probably paying attention to this don't know, but I drew the X-Men arc that brought her back in New X-Men in 2007. So she had been gone from comics for I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
But so Craig Kyle and Chris Yost wrote the arc, and I drew the comic that brought her back. So all the cool stuff that happens with her, I always feel like a little bit of, I was a part of her being who like back on the scene today, So I really like her character, and she just has such a cool. Again, Chris Pacello drew such a cool design that with the big soul sword and everything. It's like I dig her a lot.
Yeah, very cool. Well, cool. As I said, I think this is a great book. I think it's a great introduction to the Marvel universe. It's a great, way to introduce these characters to kids, and the response to it is really terrific.
Thank you.
And I think you guys have really hit something really strong here. Let's do the wrap up here. We always have two questions that we end with. The first one is there anything you want to plug that you've got coming up, whether it's in Strange Academy or whether it's some other thing that you're doing, maybe something coming up. What do you got? What do you want to do?
Yeah, well, we've got, so at Marvel, I've got more Strange Academy, and me and Humberto are still plugging away. Like I said, we're getting ready to wrap up the second graphic novel worth of issues. Then there's a really cool thing, and I don't know when it's going to be announced, so I can't say, but another cool thing at Marvel that I'm involved with, that I think is going to be really cool and absolutely accessible to kids, which is going to be really fun. Other than that, I've got Middle West. My Image book is, we are doing all three of those collected into the complete tale. So we have an oversized hardcover coming out of our entire Middle West story. So that's about a 600-page hardcover that'll be out this summer in June or July, maybe, or August. That's coming out. Other than that, I'd say just run over to my website at SkottieYoung.com and just sign up for my newsletter. That's a way for me to kind of keep in touch with everybody. You guys can learn about like what I'm doing on my Peloton, because I'm one of those people now that get on a Peloton and they'll only talk about Peloton. Right. But no, yeah, just sign up for my newsletter over there, and it's definitely the best way to keep in touch and figure out when I've got a new cool screen print coming out. At my store, we're getting ready to launch a whole new line of prints. We just put a bunch of prints in the vault, took them off, and have a whole new lineup of prints coming out in the next couple of weeks. So we've got a lot of fun stuff happening at this site.
Super cool. Everybody do that. The last question is, we have a lot of kids who are watching the shows. A lot of them, have expressed interest in doing comics and doing cartoons of their own. A lot of aspiring creators watch the series sort of to learn about making comics. So if there was one tip, one thing, whether it's a craft thing or an emotional thing or even a spiritual thing about how you make comics and your piece of advice, what might that be?
I would say, look at your life, look at the things you're interested in, see what gets you excited, and just start telling stories. And stories don't have to be 20 pages. Stories could be one panel, one page, 3 pages. The biggest thing to do is start writing, start drawing. Don't worry about if it's good or great or amazing. Do it and then do it again and do it again. The only way that you really, really learn how to do anything in life is to do it and repeat it a lot. So if you want to draw comics, keep a sketchbook with you and draw all the time. Draw a page of hands and fill it with hands doing different poses. And then do that again and do that again and do a page of heads. And if you want to be a writer, keep a book with you or keep your iPad with you and journal. I can't tell you how important journaling is to documenting your experience. Like everything that we write comes from our real life. So that's where I think there's a lot of truth. There's almost nothing that you guys read in that Strange Academy thing that doesn't have some actual truth connection to a piece of my life, whether directly or indirectly through people in my world. So yeah, just go out there, find your truth, find your inspiration and passion, and put it on paper, and just have fun and express yourself.
It's awesome. I love that answer. That's great.
Thank you.
I really want to thank you for taking the time and talking to us. I'm sorry we missed Humberto. However, that didn't work out.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a time situation. I don't know what's going on.
We probably didn't get the communication correct.
Right.
It happens sometimes, but this was a fun hour and a half here. And it's a great book. It really, truly is. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a kid out there who's looking for a book to read, this is a great one. You're going to get a thrill out of this, and you're going to want to read more. And they're making more on a really regular basis. So that's even better, right? That's really terrific. That was our pick for May. I just letting you know that next month's book is The Seekers of Aweto. The Hunt is On. This is a gorgeous painted book. There's a couple pages there. You can just see how pretty this is. From an author, I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Ni Jun, who's in China. Unfortunately, because he's in China, he is not able to talk to us. So we're not doing an interview next month. But this is next month's book to look forward to, and you're going to really, really dig this one as well. And then in April, May, we come back and we have Young Shadow by Ben Sears. So, and that we have an interview with. So that's what the next couple of months look like, guys and gals and people who are neither or both or whatever you are. It's all good. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you guys for reading comics. I want to thank you for being part of the club. I want to thank Skottie and Humberto for making great comics. I want to thank Jordan for running the show here. I want to thank Zoe and Kat, my staff, for keeping the store going and making me look good. I want to thank our sponsors at The Beat. And mostly I want to thank you kids for reading comics. Keep reading comics. Read more comics. We'll see you next month. Well, 2 months. Thanks very much for watching this episode of the Kids Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were seeing, please subscribe and hit the bell up in the corner. We'd like to invite you to join the club. Every month you'll get a great new book curated by our staff, and it's a fantastic program. So please join. That address is running along the bottom right now. Thanks very much.